Okay, so today I am drawing a character from, basically it's a D&D character. So you can see me getting started. I usually, again, use bright colors for my lines, and it's not cheating to use references, despite what some people may say. Bases is a little bit more of a matter of opinion, and it really depends on the person. So you can see here I'm copying it. Or copying the eye, and usually you don't want to do that because people aren't symmetrical, or nothing's really truly symmetrical. So the character is actually the wife of the character I was thinking of. So I basically created this story because I keep seeing all this whole goblin core aesthetic thing, so I'm like, I bet a goblin would really be into that. So I created this character and her wife. And evidently I ended up deciding it would be better to do orc and goblin, so it's half and half. There's much piercing going on, but... So drawing-wise, you will see me use a lot of techniques that I don't usually use. For example, I don't actually usually do piercings. That's just not something I do. And you can see me kind of slowly going through and figuring out the proportions, because this is very much a style that it's not usually what I draw in. Also, you have to love the circle tool, because honestly, 10 out of 10 makes my life so much easier. But basically, I set out and I figure out the basic shapes of where everything's going to go, and then I figure out fully what I want to do, and usually I draw face and then body, and then maybe I'll go back and add details, and then I'll draw clothes over top of it. But again, I try a lot of different things here that I don't usually do. I guess I should probably tell you about the character. So again, I mentioned the whole goblin core thing. And so the story is basically that this character was very drunk. And she spotted the character that I originally based this whole story off of, and basically just asked her to marry her on the spot because she found the whole goblin core thing very appealing. And you'll notice my music because, I mean, who doesn't draw with something to listen to? But, anyway, so orc-goblin wife's very drunk, and she basically asks this woman to marry her on the spot, and the woman had a rather bad day, so she went with the natural reaction and throat punched the goblin wife so hard that she not only is dropped, but she also breaks the table and dents the ground. And of course, this is very attractive, so the wife is smitten after that. So after a very long and persistent insisting, she manages to win this small, very well, she's not really Angie. She was Angie at the time. Small Angie being over, and then it goes on to go into the story of where I would maybe use the character, because the small character is actually the D&D character I was going to be using. So the story would then go that, that Goblin Wife is staying home with their kids at the moment, recovering from an injury. That Goblin Wife is with added facts like Goblin Wife is a barbarian, and that the small wife wanted to get out for a bit, but she's just a housewife. And if you've ever seen Full Metal Alchemist, we all know what just housewife means. Well, that's the backstory. Again, if I'm going back to the drawing, is you'll notice that I use a lot of weird techniques, and it was hard to do the proportions, especially because both stance and the fact that this is a very muscled woman, and, non-human characters. So I end up doing a lot of fiddling and working on where I want all the proportions to be, and you'll see me go back a lot and move and remove things, or make something and be like, nah, I don't like that. And I continuously use references. And I might have mentioned bases, and it really depends on the person. My typical rule of thumb, if I'm going to use a base, I'd be like, hey, I used a base for this, and maybe link to the base, or be like, show a picture or something, like, this is what I used, and here's what I've done, sort of thing. But, it's really perspective. Some people who just need it because they want to practice something specific, or they just need help getting poses or something down. This obviously was not a base. This was all freehand, or as freehand you can get with the drawing tablet, but I should probably branch out, given that I almost always draw boots, but there's not quite anything as great as wearing a good pair of boots. So this is what you see me do here is something called, I believe it's called the spiral technique, but I could be wrong on that. It's for basically judging distancing, and I don't remember where exactly, but it was some video I watched on YouTube that's like, this is how you do this, and I'm like, finally, someone has shown me the way. But yeah, this was a tough one, and I ended up changing a lot of things. I will admit I did really enjoy, once I figured out proportions, I did enjoy drawing the hammer. That was actually quite a bit of fun. So I fixed the ear because angling it didn't work right. And I added some more hair. And then I continued on. And here's where I start adding in some clasps and such for her hair and actually start outlining, because I always do bright colors to do a base, and then once I have a basic idea and a final idea of what I like, I will go through and I will outline it all in black. Now, this is not something everyone does, nor is it something you have to. Some people don't use any outlines, but this was something I was like, and I always do, so. And I tend to, as I go along, if I'm like, I want to fix and add this, I'll do so. So you'll see, like, I'll add eyelashes, or adjust the nose, or If you see me mess up a few too many times, I did keep... One of my biggest problems, which is always why you should double, triple check, is to make sure you're on the right layer. Guess who keeps forgetting and is always on the wrong layer? Because inevitably, I try to do, like, an own separate layer for colors and such when I eventually do get to that, and then I'm like, oh no, I'm on the wrong layer. I'm like, well, because the whole point of having a separate layer for this is what the color of everything's going to be is so I don't have to go back and erase those when I'm done drawing everything. Guess what generally never gets to happen because I'm on the wrong layer and I don't check enough. So now I'm just kind of outlining clothes and working on finishing up the various things. And of course, you can see me outlining all of the muscles. I do eventually end up adding little bits, make it more flowy and to give an illusion of even more abs because this is a very muscled woman. And I kind of did like a pseudo skirt loincloth thing because barbarian, but you know. And you can see I mess around a little bit because what I drew and what was in my head is not, as most artists would understand, doesn't always equate. So what I was thinking was it would be furred. So just kind of that fluffy image. So I just went with a single line and I'm like, this is fur. So I could have gone back and done like little ruffles and stuff, but honestly I couldn't be bothered, especially because generally when I start drawing it'll be really late or I'll draw for hours and I'm like, I don't need to make this harder for myself. And if you're like, how do you do feet? I don't know, honestly. Most of the time I BS it. Like, there are methods, and generally, feet and hands are these odd triangle bases. But, otherwise, I kind of just wing it. Like, the inside of the foot has a curve, kind of almost like, I want to say like a derpy 3 shape, and then the outside of the foot is a little more, not quite a C, because it's very stretched, but that's kind of how it is. And then, really, hands tend to be triangles, but you can see I kind of did a rounded thing. Then, I had to go back and kind of fudge the hammer a little bit. I tried, like, do I need another angle here, or... Of course, doing it in sections. I'm still not entirely sure of the end there, but... So I don't know if I mentioned in my last video, but I have learned the secret of drawing. The secret is, there is no secret. Everything is basic shapes. Everything can be broken down into basic shapes. Like, the hammer is pretty much just a square with some, I believe, trapezoids. It's been a hot minute since I knew every odds and ends shape. But, and you can see me adding armor here, but basically everything is a basic shape. Faces are primarily circles with like triangles stuck on the end. Hands are typically triangular or diamond or some similar shape. A lot of things, surprisingly, on the body can be made with circles. So basically, if you can draw a basic shape or learn how to draw a basic shape, you can draw on the style like this, or similar. And it varies depending on the style. Like, I tend to do a kind of cartoonish anime style. And that's just typically what I do. By the way, I believe I merged layers there, and this is one of the new things I was trying out to get that white outline, and because sometimes when I blend, the blend is up too high, and it will show the back layer underneath, and I usually like to set the background to some general color so I can see where that's happening. Where was I? Right. So, basic shapes and different for different styles. Like, if you're going for more of a chibi style, there will be a lot more circles involved, especially in the face area. And then there's a lot less, I almost want to say intense shapes. Like, I don't know if you saw it when I was doing the lines for it, but so I do, again, I do it in stages. So I do the head, which is a circle, and then the parting line for where the face will be. And I'm going to interrupt myself to talk about this. So, orcs and goblins have, like, different colors. Like, one is red and one is green. I was like, pretty sure this is just brown, but I'm going to check. So, I was just going to combine them. So, I picked, basically, I made the color, I took the color, and I'm like, I'll take this color, and then I used that to decide my color base for the skin tone. Anyway, back to the drawing bits. So, for face, you're going to do a circle, and then there's usually a line in the middle, and that will change where the line is, depends on how the character is facing. So, I typically always draw in the middle, just because proportions are easier for me to figure out that way. Your line would be more to the side if your character's face was turning to the side, and you would draw from there. And the size and shapes of the base shapes would be different depending on what you're doing. So, from once I do the face and I got that, I start just rough sketching the chin, and I'll make adjustments as I go of how I want it. And then usually at some point I'll go over that, because the bottom of this circle that I used as the base of the head is not always in the right place. So I'll adjust that so I have two lines as guidelines of where my eyes are going to go. And then from there I base a little bit down of where the nose is going to go, and a little bit down of where the mouth is going to go, and then your ears always go somewhere between your eyes and your nose. And that's how you kind of figure out placement for face. And then I do baseline of just kind of a base shape of how I want the character to stand, and I start filling in circles. So I'll start, maybe the shoulders will be like this, or I'll do the base shape of, here's where the chest is. And then from there I'll be like, okay, here's where the butt is. And then from there I do the sides and start from there. And then when you're doing legs and arms and stuff, I'll do a circle. Again, there's lots of circles in this. A circle is the base, and then usually it's circle for, I can't words right now. So from your shoulder to your elbow is one circle, and then your elbow itself is a circle, as you kind of want to mark out a joint, and usually you'll do elbow depending on how it's facing, which is why sometimes it looks funky, because I tend to always like to include the elbow. And then from the circle of your elbow to your wrist is another circle oval shape, and it's kind of the same with your legs. So there's the hip joint, and then there's hip to knee, and then knee to ankle. And you can do ankle joint. I just don't typically do that, because my characters, again, are always wearing boots. I suppose I should probably talk about color too. So obviously I chose color picker, chose one. Anytime you do white, you don't actually want to usually go straight white, or at least I never do, because there's nothing more white than white. So white will always be my brightest color, and then I will go a little bit down, depending on what I'm doing, because sometimes I will do something where it's more tinted yellow or something. I don't do that often, so it's a little bit down to make like almost a gray, or insert color here of whatever patch you're on, and then I will do that again for the darker color. So you'll have a kind of gray white, or whatever variation in color you're in, a dark color, and then white as your highlight. And I might have mentioned I use typically 3 colors, with an exception for the hair, because I usually do something different for that. And before I forget to mention, the same applies for dark colors. Especially since I do outlines, so I almost never, if I'm going to make something that's black, it will never actually be black, because then it blends with the outline. And again, I mentioned blurring, and this is something I do to fix it. It covers up the patches so nothing shines through. So you never want to do really dark colors when you're doing outlines like this, because it will just merge with your outline and look really messy. So almost black, lighter than that, and then the middle one is always your base color, with the dark color being shadow and the light color being highlight. I also do a thing where sometimes I don't like to do it that way, and I'm like, I definitely want this color, so I'll take I will take the spray paint tool, and I'll set it to like black or something, and from there I will do shadow or highlight, depending on whether I'm using black or white. Right, so another thing to note is edge lighting, I guess would be the right term, which is always going to be your brightest color. So again, if you're using white, you would shift that and so on. It's typically you're going to pick which direction your light source is going to come from, and then only light along that edge. I am not very consistent with lighting, but that's basically the great magical secret of how that works. I'm just going back here and adding in some details for the wood, which I don't... yeah, I'm just doing coloring now, and yep, there it is. I start doing lines. When you're doing lines in a wood pattern, you see I do kind of swirls, and I do lines that follow it, and that's typically what you want. I'm not like 100% the bestest of all time of doing wood patterns, but that's generally what I do. And again, I'm not really super consistent with source lighting or where the light's coming from. I just kind of do whatever. When you have round things, it tends to just be that, kind of like that. I'm merging all my mini layers to make it easier to scroll through. Sometimes it's easier to just, and I know it looks silly, but it's easier just to fill in sections of color, even if you're going to go back and change the color over top of it on like clothing or something for something else. Yeah, obviously I didn't edit too much, and I just left in the stuff so you all could see my entire process. Generally, if I have big sections where I have to color with one color, I'll do main color, and then I'll go do all the shadows for that section, and then highlight and so on. And provided I remember, I'll go through and I'll do the blur. And depending on how contrasting your colors are, or how far apart in kind of shade, because you can't always 100% perfect, like, yes, it's this shade, and then this shade, and this shade, that's it. That doesn't always work. So you have to use the blur tool on a higher setting to get that to work right. Which is why I usually have to go back and fix, because I don't always change my blur tool, but its power, I guess, or how strength between blurring. So what I'm doing here, before I forget to mention, generally it's shadow around the face, parts of the nose, and then a highlight's going to be kind of a circle with a point, with a line down the nose, and then 2 bright spots on the cheek, and 1, I believe you typically put a highlight at what would be the Cupid's bow. Here I'm going through and I'm editing and I'm doing the mouth, which, great tool, fill tool, provided you can actually get sections to work. Because God forbid you have one gap in your lines. But the blur tool, not the blur tool, the fill tool has an option for gradient, which is awesome. Then I go back and do that, and lots of blurring and coloring. Other such. Yes, patterning. Patterning. I just kind of picked a random pattern. It's basically just squiggles to do the idea. Since I mentioned the furs, I wanted the idea of it's some sort of pelt. And here you can see I'm using not quite black, as I mentioned earlier, to where I started doing that and decided I wanted to do gray. But, as mentioned, you want to go not full black if you're going to do an outline. And again, really, you should not ask me how to do feet, because 100% of the time I just totally wing it. I do feel like I should mention, with everything going on, before we're all like, oh no, appropriated culture or whatever, and like, no, I literally just combined colors. It's like, this is what this character looks like, and it's these two colors. If it weren't half and half, it'd probably be like red or green, honestly, which, two colors of the two races, yay! So it's not a, I'm making a mime of some character. No, I just went, well, this is this color and this color, da-da. So if you're one of those people who are like, cool your jets. I should mention, for gold, I have this kind of a little too orange color, and I always just shift that more towards yellow to get a gold color. And it's kind of the same thing for a silver. There's a specific gray that you just shift more towards one color next to the other. And yay, armor time. Which was a little bit of a pain in the butt. Because I was like, nope, screw this. Yeah. You'll see sometimes I'll be like, oh, I'll just keep these separate. And I'll be like, it's easier to fill in the whole area. I can fix it later. It looks like I'm doing nothing, but I'm slowly going back and adding shading. And, fixing my YouTube, because God forbid you stop for so many minutes. Don't immediately click it so you knows you're still watching. Like, I know it's a really useful feature, but it does get annoying. Especially when you're in the middle of doing something. So now I'm going in and I'm obviously filling out more of the fluff for what would be the fur bits. And, fixing my lines. Yeah, I believe that there was one of the instances where I'm on the wrong layer. Make sure you're on the right layer. Despite it being really speed up, this took quite a few hours to do. Like, it wasn't, like, super strenuous or anything. Also, if you're gonna draw, probably find a good drawing position that's comfortable and not, and, shift every once in a while, and don't pull a me where you just, like, I'm gonna draw today, hunched over, and then several hours later, you unfurl yourself, and you're like, ow, everything hurts. And that's why you should probably not really pull yourself when drawing. Which, admittedly, I want to say I don't always do that, but I do it a lot, is I roll myself up. I just do better when I'm... Excuse me. At the desk I have. It is far easier to sit there and draw. I will at least keep better posture. I may have mentioned hair is different, so you'll typically do base color, shadow, and then you only want to do highlights where shine will hit the hair. And then I'll go back in with an even darker color to add like little lines to make that not so blocky and thick and unrealistic. Or, yeah. Unrealistic's not necessarily the right word there. You get the point. And generally I would, by the way, add colors off to the side somewhere, so if you're like, oh no, I forgot to do this bit, you can go back and just select the color. Because once you've blurred it, it's kind of harder to know, like, especially if you've picked colors that are very close, to know where one thing is in the other. And this is me erasing all my extra colors because I no longer need them, and merging. Yay. So I do go back through and I thicken up that line a little bit. Again, this was something completely new to me. I don't typically do the outline like that, but I've seen it done before and like, hey, this is cool, I'll give this a try. And then I mess around with the background a bit just to, you know, kind of edge in the character, fix the lines a bit. And then I try 50 million times to add my signature, but typically when you're adding a signature, the idea is to make it subtle so someone can't go in and, like, erase that. This is mine, so I typically try to make it somewhat subtle. Anyway, that's the end of the video. You're probably seeing a blank screen right now, but, you know, you liked it. Like, comment, subscribe, whatever. Do whatever. Have fun. Hopefully this was helpful. If you have questions, feel free to ask. If you want to know anything else, let me know. Bye-bye!